At one of the highest points in her career, Amanda Blanc made a decision that most executives would never make. She walked away.
If something is making you unhappy, why would you do it? You need to move on.
She left one of the biggest jobs in global insurance with nothing lined up, no safety net.
When you leave an organisation, it's brutal. You're gone. That's it. You said you're going to go. Your emails are off. Everything's off.
Were you scared?
I don't know if it was scared, worried, yeah.
That instinct to trust herself and act has shaped how she makes decisions ever since. And when she later took over Aviva in the middle of a crisis, she brought that same approach with her, making tough calls, simplifying the business, and acting fast.
You've got to do things. You can't just talk about it.
At her first annual meeting as CEO, she was subjected to sexist comments from shareholders in front of a live audience. The next day, she responded publicly, writing about it on LinkedIn. The post went viral, sparking a wider conversation about how female business leaders still face misogyny at work.
Criticise me if I'm doing a really bad job. I have no problem with that. But not for being a woman. That's just crazy.
These are Amanda Blanc's executive decisions. You are one of the major reasons why I pitched CNBC for executive decisions. I think you are an inspirational character, and I'm very proud to call you a friend and acquaintance as well. So look,
well, thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
What a build-up.
Let's start off at the beginning, the Rhondda
Okay.
Valley. I go straight to the fact that the coal mining communities throughout the country were really suffering in the 1980s. And I just kind of wonder if you can encapsulate the kind of upbringing you had as well.
I think about my childhood. I think about it as, living, basically every house was like right next to each other, literally rows and rows of houses going up the valleys. Some houses had toilets, some houses didn't. Loads and loads of community work, lots and lots of chapel work. I used to go to chapel like twice on a Sunday. It was all about performance, music everywhere, and a real feeling of belonging. You'd walk down the street and everybody knew you, everybody knew your business, but in a way you didn't mind that. Yeah. It was just really lovely. The valleys were built around these sort of, tens of coal mines that were built in the sort of 1800s, 1900s and became, really the wealth of Wales. Both my grandfathers were miners. Both been down the mine from the age of 14. Can you even imagine that? Going down and sort of like underground when his father carried him home on the first day. And you cannot imagine. And all of my grandparents were all of 10, 12, 14 children, of which only probably 6 or 7 survived. So the women were just basically having children every year almost of their childbearing lives. But honestly, so happy, so loving. And just really wonderful and so musical.
Was it a Yamaha that your parents bought you, or
yes.
the piano that glistened in your
and they were so proud
the most
of
important room in the house as well?
And the best room. It was called the best room, and it went in the best room. And the only time you went in the best room was to practice the piano or at Christmas, and that was it. You didn't go in the best room otherwise. And I can remember this piano. It did not have a mark on it. And even to today, that piano does not have a mark on it. It was perfect. And I used to have to practice this piano, but my mum and dad had worked so hard for that. My mum had 3-4 jobs. She would go out in the evening to work. There was a factory, where she would basically peel the rubber off these rubber rings that were then made into ashtrays. And my dad was a chemical engineer, which he qualified in the evening school. And he would travel all over the UK selling chemicals to water treatment companies.
You could have easily been a professional musician as well. Grade 8 clarinet, I know that, and grade 8 piano as well.
Yeah.
Did you tell yourself as a young woman growing up that you were going to be a musician?
Oh, no, look, I believe that was what I was going to be, for sure. It was I was in the amateur dramatics. I honestly, in chapel, I was doing the solo, playing the piano, reading the recitation. It was everybody else out of the way. Here I am. I love doing this stuff. But I was not good enough to do that. I was not. I got to grade 8 through hard work. I got in both piano and clarinet. But ultimately, when I went for my interviews at for university, and you sort of saw these other people, and you were like, okay, right, you're not good enough to do this. And, one of my great strengths, I think, is that I am able to work out like when I'm going to be really good at something and when I'm not.
But even at that moment, you didn't have a passion for, I want to do this, I want to work in insurance, I want to do something else.
No, look, if I think about the school I went to, Treorchy Comprehensive School, right? It was not a great school, right? There was no money. And so, school didn't talk about business. The most aspirational thing that somebody in school would want to be was like a solicitor or an accountant or a teacher. And that was really aspirational. It was like, oh, did you know X wants to be this? I didn't even think about that. So nobody knew about business. You didn't think about it.
You make the decision very early on to get out of Wales. And I say get out, get out for your career. And I've seen it written a couple of times. You had two career options, as I see it. You could go and work for Mid Glamorgan County Council, or you could leave Wales, where you had all your comfort zone, and go off to Luton with a graduate training job at Commercial Union, which obviously later became part of Aviva, which is an extraordinary journey as well. Why did you choose the latter? Because that is a really big early decision for a young woman to make.
Yeah, no, it is. So I was sort of 21 and I finished university in Liverpool and I did not have a Scooby-Doo. So it was like, I need to apply for some jobs. I saw this job for Commercial Union graduate trainee. I thought, okay, what's insurance? Whatever, I'll apply to that. And then I had this job in Mid Glamorgan County Council and I thought, this is fantastic. I can stay at home. I can live with my mum and dad and, I can keep all my friends that I've got, or I can go to Luton and be a graduate trainee for Commercial Union. And I don't know what it was, but I just thought, if I don't go now, I'm never going to go.
Yeah.
So I did. And, I can remember my mum and dad dropping me off in a bed and breakfast in the middle of Luton. And it was about 8:00 on a Sunday night. It had taken us like 100 hours to get there. I'd never been to Luton and thinking, oh, this is a big decision I've just made. As you're waving them off, going, see you later.
Did they help you make the decision?
No, they didn't. Because my mum and dad were really phenomenal at just saying, you need to make the decision. They wanted me to do what was right for me.
You say, I didn't have a Scooby-Doo, but actually you thought, no, I'm going to build this career. I don't have a predestiny.
I definitely didn't feel like I had a predestiny. Even at that point, I think what I did was, and this is the way I've approached everything, is like you turn up and you think, I'm going to just do my best. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to see how this all pans out. And the brilliant thing about the program was you had 2 years of basically just going around every single department in Commercial Union. So you got to see the whole business. And it was phenomenal. And they were investing time in me as an individual. And the other thing they insisted was you had to do your professional exams. And if you didn't pass your professional exams every 6 months, you were kicked off the program.
Wow. So there's a lot of pressure on you at an early age.
There was pressure, but I liked that.
And do you still like the pressure?
Yes.
Obviously, because you're a CEO.
I like the pressure. I like the deadline. I like the knowing you've got to work hard to do something. And so that was really brilliant. So there was no calling. It was just, you got into it. And then I realized I really loved underwriting. And then I thought, I'll become an underwriter. And then I was a good underwriter. And I thought, actually, I could really quite like to do sales. And then the opportunity was there to do sales. So it was just opened up all of these other opportunities.
You remind me a lot of the conversation I had with Julia Hoggett about the sexism that was in the financial services. She was in investment banking, you were insurance in the 1990s. And I remember saying to Julia, I was in the 1990s as well, and I was on the other side of it as well. I was on the male side of the patriarchy. I was on the male side of that sexism. It was a very tough place to be in financial services in the 90s, in the noughties, and perhaps to a certain degree still is now. How did that manifest itself in your career early on as well?
So I would say in my early career, no. It really interestingly. In the 90s, I think that it really was a meritocracy at Commercial Union. If you were the best person for the job, you got the job. And there were lots of different opportunities to do different things. I think that what you're referring to came much later through the 2000s, 2010s, where I would be more exposed to conferences, events, where there would be this dynamic going on. Then I think you did experience it there for sure.
Insurance has been, I think, a very similar culture to what I grew up in the 90s. And it's a very drinky, male-dominated environment as well.
Yeah.
But you're saying you just didn't experience that.
So I'm not saying I didn't experience, I didn't feel intimidated by it, and I didn't feel that I was negatively impacted by it. I mean, you can't not experience it, Steve, because I think, you only have to even walk through Leadenhall today. It's not somewhere I would want to walk through on a Thursday evening, for example, even today. Like,
but they
why
love
would
a lunch
you?
at Leadenhall, and you don't do that.
No, I don't drink, and I don't do lunch.
Yeah.
And I do think that, and I've never really done a lot of dinners because, when you have children, I want to go home and see my children at night. So I never really did that, but I saw so many women that did and got themselves into difficult situations, when they were drinking and some of these conferences and things like that. And I would always say to my team, and I always had a good proportion of men and women in my team, when we'd go to conferences, I'd say, you're here to work. Just be really, really clear about that.
Yeah.
Don't drink. Don't drink. You can drink at home. You can drink it at other times, but we're here to work. Don't get yourself into a difficult situation.
But the men can. The men can go off and drink. And so straight away, it's a different set of rules. Even then, even though you didn't experience sexism so much in the 90s and the early noughties, it's still a different set of rules for women. That's pretty frustrating.
Well, it is, but I would always say that to the boys as well. Like, I wouldn't just say it to the girls.
Right,
I would say,
okay.
to my whole, when I was at AXA, which is a lot of this time, I would say to the team, right, we're going to work. Yeah. The reason we have these conferences, that we pay money to sponsor these conferences, is that this is meant to build business opportunities. So let's be very clear. That's what we're there for. Today, when Aviva has those conferences, we send security people to the conferences as well to just make sure that our teams are okay. You shouldn't have to do that, but that's what you do, because we do not want to put any of our team in a difficult situation. And, as sad as that is the situation that we operate in.
Tell me about some of the toughest decisions during those periods. Can you remember a time when you made a really bad decision and how you react to making bad decisions?
So I think that the good thing about being a CEO and being in a leadership is you're going to make lots and lots of bad decisions, right? But you always got to think, okay, how do I turn that into a good decision? I was convinced that at the end of 1997 that I wanted to be a management consultant. So it was like, I'm going to go and work for a management consultancy
you're
firm.
30 years old at this
so
stage.
I'm not very old, right? Other people had said, are you really sure that that's what you want to do? Anyway, I get to do this job. I mean, literally a month in, and I'm thinking, what am I doing? Oh my gosh, this is like a massive mistake. Yeah. I should not have done this. But the good thing about, I think, me and my decisions is I realize quickly when I've made a mistake. And, okay, you've got to give it a chance, because in a month you don't know. But after 6 months, I knew, and it was like, okay, I need to move on from here. I need to go back in to something that I love, which is leading people.
Why do you love insurance?
I love insurance because I think it's really purposeful. If I think about, I'll give you an example. One of my very, very good friends, her husband very, very suddenly died 16 months ago. And she had a life insurance policy with Aviva. I didn't know that, and she didn't tell me that. And then as she was going through the grieving and the process of trying to sort out all of her husband's affairs, she and I spoke, and she said, your team are just amazing. I said, well, why? She said, well, when I rang them and told them that my husband had died and that I had these two young daughters, 8 and 9 years old, yes, they dealt with my claim, but they sent me these two beautiful teddy bears that had the daughters' names embroidered on the ear of the teddy bear. In that moment of deep, deep grief, those children got some sort of relief from those teddy bears. Nobody told the Aviva team to do that. Nobody. They just did it. And I think that looking after people where they're in their most difficult time, they've had a critical illness, they've had somebody that's passed away, they're not very well, they need looking after, they need somebody to guide them through that. I just think insurance is so purposeful.
Is that
how many other businesses can you say can do something like that?
Is that something that you have instilled in them, or is it just them good people who happen to be working there?
It is the DNA of the organisation, and that's why Aviva, I think, is so special, because that's how our people think about looking after customers. It's just knowing that people are at their most vulnerable and thinking how you can, in some small way, make it just slightly better for them. And of course, we do things wrong, and inevitably you get things wrong. But I would say, on the whole, what we desperately try to do is do the right thing for the people that trust us. They trust you, right? That you're going to be there when something bad happens. It's not a handbag or a pair of shoes. It's a promise to pay, and that's why I think insurance is unlike any other industry.
Well, that explains a lot of why you've loved working in the industry for so long. You haven't always loved your career decisions, though.
Nope.
And perhaps one I want to just go into a little bit more detail, something you haven't revealed a lot of information about previously. You went to Zurich. You went to Zurich in 2018. The CEO there, Mario Greco, and you left pretty much a year later as well. In fact, resigned after 8 months, I've got written down here. You were the CEO for EMEA. It was a really big role. Why did you make that decision to join and to leave?
So to join, I had been at AXA since 2011. I had done the job for 7-8 years. The business had turned around. I've always said I'm sort of not a business as usual leader. I sort of like a challenge. I like to be able to do something different. And I couldn't see that I was going to get that opportunity at AXA. So, the opportunity came to me to go to Zurich to do this job as the CEO of EMEA. And hey, it looked like an amazing job. Zurich is a brilliant company. And then I thought, this is a really good opportunity. Okay. So, this, what could possibly go wrong? This was going to be great. But I think I have to do something that is meaningful. I have to do something where I feel that I've got authority to make decisions and that I can make a difference. And the role really was a spam breaker role, as much as it was not presented in that way. And that was not going to ever work for me. And as much as I tried to make that work, ultimately not being able to have the authority to make changes, to make decisions, that cultural fit, it just didn't work.
And that's the word I was going to come to next, cultural. Again, Zurich is a great company. Mario Greco is a great CEO. But you've already showed us what kind of culture you have tried to create and what you applaud at Aviva. Was it the wrong culture for you?
For me, it was, absolutely. And I think that, I do really think that you're at work a lot of the time. Right? I'm in at sort of 7:30 in the morning. I don't leave till sort of 7:30 or later at night. So you have to be really happy doing what you're doing. If something is making you unhappy, then why would you do it? You need to move on, and you need to say, I made a bad call here.
But let me get this right. You've got your 2 wonderful daughters.
Yep.
You've got Ken, your
Yep.
wonderful husband, who's looking after the girls for
Yep.
you as well. You have quit Zurich without another job to go to.
That's exactly right.
Did you feel at one point this could be a very big mistake?
Oh, yeah. I mean, of course. You make the decision. And, Ken and I obviously talked about that a lot. But he said to me, you're unhappy. This is not for you. You're not able to do what you do, which is affect change and make a difference and, do all of those wonderful things. So you've got to back yourself. So I came home on the plane I was actually in Germany. I came home from Germany and landed in Heathrow and thought, okay, well, what does that mean? Because when you leave an organization, it's brutal. You're gone. That's it. You said you're going to go. Your emails are off. Everything's off. You land. You get in the car, you drive back from Heathrow to Hampshire, which is not a very long journey.
No.
You pull up at home and you go, okay, right.
Were you scared?
I don't know if it was scared, worried, yeah. I've got two daughters.
You're at your peak of your career
Exactly.
in your early 40s.
No, absolutely. I do not deny any of that. I rang my dad that night and I told him, and he said, are you happier now? I said, I am. He said, then you've made the right decision.
Yeah.
Nobody ever said, stick it out, because I just don't see the point of that if you know that it's not right. And I did know.
You say your parents supported you, your father, but Ken obviously supported you and told
Yes.
you, this isn't working for you as well. You two strike me as a fantastic couple as well. And Ken made the decision probably about 15, 16, 17 years earlier when you had your second daughter,
That's right.
Rhiannon,
Yeah.
to give up his career.
Yeah.
Now, lots of people give up their careers, but more often than not, it's the woman who's historically had to give up the career for the man. That is amazing. And he had a very successful career. He was in the same business you were in as well. Why Did you both make that decision?
Yeah, he's a physics graduate. He's got an MBA. He's a chartered insurer. Absolutely. But when we had the discussion, actually, it was when Rhiannon, I was pregnant with Rhiannon, and I had this job offer to go to Towergate, and
we're in the early noughties.
So we would have been sort of early, and I had the contract for Towergate in one hand and the pregnancy test in the other, and I was like, okay, this is going to be tricky. Like, I don't quite know what to do here. Do I sign this contract or not? And I rang what was going to be my future boss at Towergate, and I said, look, I can't come. I'm pregnant. And he said, well, have you been pregnant before? I went, yes. He said, well, you know what it's like then? I said, I do. He said, well, you're coming. Come, don't be silly. It's fine. And Ken and I had that conversation, and Ken said, okay, this will only work really if one of us stays at home. And I'm happy to do that because I think that you can do really well in this role, and I'm happy to support you. But we had a deal. And the deal was that, I would talk about work at home, that I wouldn't come home and do this, which I think a lot of people do, and say, okay, that's work. Now I'm home and I don't want to talk about it.
You're a partnership. You want to do it
was
together.
A partnership. So it was interesting, you were saying that you were talking about what you do with your wife.
Yeah. She's given me one of the questions for you in a moment.
And she's given you one of the questions for me. And that's how, so yesterday, Ken and I went on a walk. And look, he feels like he knows you because obviously he watches you every morning as well. And we did the whole, okay, so what could come up in the podcast? What are you going to talk about? And I think that's a really lovely way of doing it because it means that we're treating each other as grown-ups.
Yeah.
And it also still means that I still get the silly calls from my daughters, which basically say, where have you put this and all of that. And I'm like, isn't your dad there?
But do you resent the fact that I'm even asking you about you having the career and your husband giving up his career? Because that isn't the norm. Still, we're in the third decade of the 21st century, and it's still the case.
No, I don't resent you asking it at all. And I think it was good to actually talk about it because I also think sometimes there can be this myth that you can have it all. Right, that as families, you can have it all. You can't. Yeah. You have to make compromises. You have to make decisions. And so I think you have to be realistic because there's all this, she must have had 6 nannies and, she must have had this and her husband must do this. It's not like that. In the real world, you have to have tough conversations and you have to make decisions, and particularly about how do you want your family brought up and what do you want, what you want the home environment to be. And whilst I totally respect that other people have made other decisions, we made that decision for what we believed was the right thing to do for our children.
I know you pride yourself on how you help women in the workplace have careers and their personal life as well. But you personally, I know at least one of your maternity leaves, it was way too short, wasn't it?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
6-7 weeks, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, crazy. And it was this one where I had the pregnancy test and because of course I felt, because one thing you cannot stop yourself feeling is guilt. So the whole time. So if you're at work, you feel guilty that you're not at home. If you're at home, you feel guilty you're not at work. If you're in the hairdresser, you feel guilty you're not at home or at work. There's this constant thing going on. So I felt really guilty. I felt, I've taken on this big job, CEO of this big, massive consolidating broking business that was doing a deal almost every week at that point. And I felt, I needed to go back to work. But would I recommend that to other people? I really would not. I mean, Ken will tell you the story of, the day that I went into labour with my first daughter, that I was literally on the phone to somebody basically doing a performance appraisal. And he was like, Amanda, come on. Like, we need to go.
Amanda, if your team and
I know it's crazy. I'm ashamed of that, by the way. I know, I'm ashamed of that. I'm ashamed of that. I am ashamed of that.
I'm going to talk to you now about the biggest job you've ever had. The CEO job of Aviva came up and you took it in the middle of 2020. Tell me about that.
So I was on the board as a non-executive and the CEO stepped down. There was a new chair and the CEO job was available. And I'm there thinking, oh my gosh, like this is a job for me. I mean, I knew it because this was a company I had started my career in. This is a company I had loved. This was the company I had competed against for the whole of my career. And I'm sitting there going, if only I wasn't the non-executive, maybe I could throw my hat in the ring to be the CEO. And I said that to the chair. And he said, well, why don't you throw your hat in to be the CEO? And so I did. And I got the job. And, so July the 6th, 2020, I became the CEO of Aviva. A terrifying moment in terms of like what needed to be done, but the proudest moment in my whole career that I end up back where I started.
So you've taken on a company that's underperforming, dividend cuts, bad capital markets, too many operations that aren't working, and it's COVID.
I know, it's brilliant, isn't it? I mean,
how about that for a job?
What could be better? No, I absolutely all of the above. So first of all, how do you lead a business during COVID? It was me, the CFO, one other, all sort of, practicing the sort of the distancing and all of that. The share price, the minute I walked in the door, was £2.73. We had this sprawling empire in Europe, which every time there was a bad surprise for Aviva, it came from that. So it was a case of, okay, what do you do? And I had 4 weeks before I had to stand up in front of the market and do the half-year results. So we said, okay, well, let's keep this really simple. 3 things. Focus the portfolio, okay? Sell the stuff that we don't believe is going to, we can win in those markets. Delever the business, create financial strength. The business was too highly levered. Use the money you get from the sales to delever the business. Transform the performance. I mean, it wasn't really that hard to come up with the strap lines. The hard thing was then to get on and do it. But underlying it, the business was incredibly strong. You could see that the UK, Ireland, Canada business, we had really strong market positions. And that if we could get rid of all the noise and expose those parts of the business to the world, you could see that there was a real opportunity.
How could you see that? How is it you had that clarity when none of these men did?
I think they did. But they weren't prepared to make the decision. Because effectively, if you think about what we did, we sold 1/3 of the company. If you have a bit of an ego, it's like, I'm going to sell 1/3 of the market cap of the company. But we believed that if we did that the actual valuation of the company would grow. And so if you could expose that part to the market, the wealth business, the general insurance business, the health business, we genuinely believed that could create a much more successful company.
I've got a line here from that period of time. Crisis strips leadership down to essentials, clarity, pace and empathy. And I've got another quote here. It says, you can't lead by consensus in a burning building.
No, you can't. You have to make the decisions. And then I think PowerPoint slides are like brilliant. And you see lots of people present all of these strategies. And I just said to the team, I'm not interested in the PowerPoint slides. Like, what are we going to do? And what's really funny is I've actually got it in my office today. My first appointment was for a chief of staff, and I didn't know anybody really in the business. I appointed a guy called Andrew Dinwoody, who was my chief of staff, and we sat down in my office with a big sheet of paper, and we said, what we're going to do in the first 12 months, what we're going to do in the first 2 to 3 years, and then what do we want to do after that? Interestingly, in my 4 to 5 years, it had by direct line, but I'm not saying that I was any genius, but it did have that. But in the first year, it was just deliver. Execute, sell businesses, improve performance. You've got to do things. You can't just talk about it.
We talked earlier on in this conversation about the fact that actually in the early part of your career, you didn't actually feel that there was overt sexism against you. It wasn't a big barrier to your progression within the industry as well. Then you get to this amazing role that I think you felt there was a bit of destiny about, commercial union to Aviva, and the AGM of 2022. Now, I got to be really honest, Amanda, I didn't even know the ins and outs of this as well. And I feel sorry that I didn't, because I should have done, because it was a big story at the time, where basically three, I think it was, investors got up and made a host of sexist comments at the AGM. And you had to sit there and listen to this as well. Do you want to talk me through that?
Yeah. So if you think about an AGM, like an AGM, you're prepping for what could you get asked about all the different financials, the strategy, the choices that you've made. We had sold businesses by that point. And so you get up on the stage, and we were in the QE2 in London, lots of security, obviously there always is for AGMs. So you walk onto the stage. I deliver my first 5-minute, this is what we've done. I'm actually quite proud at that point. We had done a lot of really good stuff.
Yeah. We're 2 years down the road now.
We're 2 years down the road. We'd
company.
made a lot of progress. Most of the businesses had been sold. We delevered. I think we'd literally just announced the share consolidation and the big return of capital. So I think shareholders should be happy, right? This is good. And then I sit back on the stage, and my chair George is sat next to me, and I'm here, and then the rest of the board are on the stage. And the very, very first question was from a shareholder that basically said, well, it's good to see that there are some women on the board, Mr. Chair, because, that we know that they're very good at the administrative tasks. That was the first comment of the AGM. And then, you get somebody say that I wasn't the right man for the job and about wearing a skirt. And you sort of think, oh, hang on a second. Like, this is completely wrong. But you're in the middle of the AGM. And George, at the end, as he was wrapping up, he made the comment that, I really hope we don't get these sort of comments. But we walked off the stage and we walked into the room. And I was, you're all over the place in terms of like the meeting's done and, you're thinking about that. And I walk into the room and my whole team are there and they just went, that is not on. What just happened to you is not on. And I went, oh, I suppose not. Because you start then dissecting
you yourself weren't furious at this point?
Well, at this point, you're in the middle of the AGM, Steve.
Too much going on.
There's so much else going on, and you're thinking about all of the procedural bits of it, getting everything done. Anyway, I was going to Canada that night. Yeah. So I go straight to the airport. I get on a plane to go to Canada. And as I'm on the plane, I'm thinking, no, that's not acceptable. That's actually not acceptable. Because, maybe other people are experiencing the same thing. So I get LinkedIn out, you're on a plane, it's a long plane journey, and I start to write a LinkedIn article. And as I landed, I sort of had this moment, should I press post or not? And I thought, I'm going to press post. So I did press post. I mean, literally, private comments, public comments, men, women, particularly other women who had actually experienced exactly the same thing in the AGMs from exactly the same shareholders in some instances. And the post even today, people will still comment on the post occasionally today, and they'll look at the post because you see,
I read it today.
So you'll see the post, and you'll see that people, and particularly what worried me was when I was getting the private comments from people saying, Amanda, things are really this bad, and this is what happened to me. And I had literally just taken the women in finance role, the champion role for the government. So I just thought, well, if I'm not going to speak up about it, then who actually is?
And that's the point. As CEO, you have that responsibility.
You do. Because, what you do, just say quietly, oh, let's just forget about that. Well, no. I think it was the right time to say, actually, do you know what? This is not acceptable. By all means, criticize me if I'm doing a really bad job. I have no problem with that. Tell me that you don't agree with something that I've done, a business that I've sold, a decision that I've taken, but not for being a woman. That's just crazy.
And I can't believe that you're having to face this, even at your incredible stage of your career as well. Do you still have it now to 2025, 2026?
I've stopped reading any comments below the line on articles. I just do not.
But do you have it in your encounters with other business people? Do you still have moments where you come out of a meeting?
No.
As I said to you, my wife was saying, I was telling her about this, and she said, well, yeah, it's a thing, and she's hearing about it a lot. And it's like, and the line is, did the middle of my sentence interrupt the start of your sentence?
Which is so brilliant.
Well, that's coming from my wife, so I can't take credit for that one. But it must happen all the time.
So I think because obviously you have the position of your CEO and people do tend to listen to what you're saying. You have it less so now, but I do observe it with you do sometimes see it in other environments, and I'll quite often take a side, and it can be men or women, but you see people's great ideas stolen or people not listened to because they're a bit different from other people, and you just take them to one side and you say, that was a really good idea. Like, go back in, have another go. Because it's your job, I think, to coach people through that.
One of the biggest decisions you've made since you were CEO of Aviva, and it took the market by surprise, and you've already alluded to it, and that was the very bold deal that was announced just before Christmas 2024, which was closed in July 2025. Again, people said it couldn't be done so quickly, and that was for Aviva to consolidate its huge UK position and buy Direct Line. That's a big decision. You've enjoyed that one.
Yeah, no, it's been brilliant. I mean, totally brilliant. And if I think about that decision, everybody always said, as a CEO, you've got to stand up and prove to the market that you're going to do what you're going to do quarter after quarter. When we looked at Direct Line, and we obviously looked at other opportunities in the market at the same time, we could see that they were not making traction with the market. The share price wasn't moving. And we could see that with our technology, with our expertise, with our pricing ability, that we could just make that a better business than it was. So for us, it was, okay, we should go for this. And the board was just brilliant. And, one of the people that I've just worked so brilliantly with is my chair, George Kelmer, over the last 6 years. And, everybody said, yeah, let's do it. So yeah, it was 23rd of December, 2024 that we announced that deal. It wasn't really 4 or 5 weeks before that we'd made the very first offer. So we're very, very pleased with the deal, and to complete the deal within 6 months, again, massive effort by my CFO, Charlotte Jones, who's just phenomenal. I mean, she's absolutely brilliant. She said all the way along, well. She's a very good runner. And she basically said, we will complete this by July. And everybody was looking up. Of course we will. And she was absolutely right. And she was determined to do that. And that allowed us, obviously, then to announce new targets, which is great.
Tell me what's going through here. You've decided to go for this. The market, the world doesn't know about it, is it? Is that very exciting?
It's very exciting. But in a way, it's also nerve-wracking, because you're like, lots of deals get leaked, and this, because at that point you've got various different people that are in the know, not that many, but you just never know, do you? And so you want to be the one to sort of make the decision and to push it forward. And I think we were largely, and it was hugely exciting. But for the business, right? If you think about this business that had been through so much, to be on the front foot, not on the back foot. And if I think about Aviva, we've got a 92% employee engagement score. I just think that is because the team are like, come on, bring it on.
Well, I'll just mention that you said earlier on when you took over the company, the shares were around about 273
That's right, yeah.
Last time I have a look, and I'm probably a day or so late, I think about 650 pence now. So you've had a phenomenal success on the share price during your tenure as well.
And we've sold a third of the business. Right.
Which just shows the strategy works.
Yeah.
I know a lot of your team, and I like a lot of your team, and I get on really, really well with them as well. The fact that you work with good people who have got your back and you've got their back, is that the most important thing in many ways?
Totally. Because at the end of the day, you're one person. I mean, as people say they call me relentless or whatever. I mean, I am relentless, but at the end of the day, you can only do so much. You have to have the best people around you. If you've got the best people around you, then you know that they will recruit the best people around them, and that they will recruit the best people around them. So then what happens is you end up having a brilliant organization with people that are really motivated. And culture is really important to that. Calling out bad behavior, rewarding good behavior, making sure that the performance is really high, that we're delivering for our shareholders, for our customers. That's what we're here for.
Dame Amanda Blanc, I said to you, and I mean to, you were the first person who was on my list. I finally got you. So thank you. Thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Thank you.
I make no bones about it. When I pitched CNBC for executive decisions over 1.5 years ago, it was CEOs like Amanda Blanc I had in mind. And 20 odd episodes down the line, we finally got to sit down on executive decisions. She's a brilliant CEO who came in to a sleeping giant. Aviva was a behemoth in the British finance industry, but it under-delivered under 3 successive CEOs. Amanda came in, she wasn't afraid to cut away the fat, make tough decisions, build up the business. Buying Direct Line was a great case in point, and really turn around the fortunes for the company, its employees, and the shareholders as well. She's also used her position to be a brave CEO, facing down overt, lazy, direct sexism, most notably at one of the first AGMs she held when she was the leader as well. She's a brilliant leader, she's a smart leader, but she's also a very empathetic and fun person. I thoroughly enjoyed speaking to Amanda Blanc. Thank you very much indeed for joining me on the show we call Executive Decisions. I would love to hear your feedback. Please drop your thoughts in the comments or a review. And please hit that follow or subscribe button. On the next episode, I'll be speaking to the former CEO of Goldman Sachs, Lloyd Blankfein.
Somebody put his hand on my shoulder and said, Lloyd, you may think you're changing, but everybody knows exactly who you are. And so I decided I might as well go with it because I'm not fooling anybody anyway.
I'm looking forward to it. See you then.